Let me just get a glass of water then. Okay, go ahead, Nancy.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Welcome, members of council, and welcome to our council meeting of September 10th, 2024. We will call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Be it resolved that this regular meeting now open at 6:30 p.m. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Councillor Bajelli.
All in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda.
Be it resolved that the agenda be approved as presented. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Councillor Bajelli.
Any questions on the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and nature thereof? Seeing none. So we're moving in with two of our delegation. We're going to be starting off with the RV Anderson group. So Trevor Keeley will be joining us, and in regards to the North Stormont Water and Wastewater Master Plan. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council. I am here along with Darika Sharma from our company to present preliminary findings of the Water and Wastewater Master Plan for North Stormont. Just as I didn't have a chance to discuss, is it the expectation that we'll share our screen and show the slide deck we have, or is that the easiest way here?
Yeah, I would. I feel that would be best, so you guys can switch over to the documents.
Okay, I'll do that.
Maybe before you start, Trevor, we can maybe just enlighten. So we are having this presented to council, and for council to have questions tonight. There's no public input that will be brought into this, but just maybe letting the people know that next, I believe it's next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that?
Yeah, what we'll do.
6 to 9. Go ahead.
Exactly. This is a sort of a sneak peek for council of what we'll be presenting at the Public Information Center, which is being held next Tuesday, September 17th from 6 till 9. And so this is basically the boards we're going to be presenting. Obviously, there may be some tweaks between now and then, but this gives you guys as councilors and mayor a chance to review what we've been examining, what some of the preliminary recommendations are, and have a chance to either voice your thoughts now or have a chance to put them down on paper, and if you bring them next time, or email them to us at any time, obviously. I don't seem to be able to share my screen. Oh, now I can. All right, I stand corrected. All right, is that on screen now?
So it is on there now, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So like I said, these are the slides that we're going to have up on boards in the community center next week. So to give you a background, obviously there'll be a welcome board. You guys are obviously welcome to come to the open house as well, to the Public Information Center. What it is meant for, the Public Information Center, is to allow stakeholders, including the general public, a chance to review the existing conditions, the calculations about capacity and things like that for each of the three communities, and have a look at the assessments that were made that reached the recommendations that we're intending to move forward with, pending, stakeholder consultations and input from the public. So this public will have a chance to either ask us questions while we're standing around there, but also filling out question forms in the presentation to leave for our consideration, so that they're documented as part of the EA process. And what we're doing, this is a master servicing study. So we were hired by the Township of North Stormont to undertake a municipal class environmental assessment, which follows the Ontario Environmental Assessment Act. What this is a master plan, so it follows approach 1, which is known as a high-level study. So we are looking at each of the three communities, Finch, Chrysler, and North Stormont, looking at their water and wastewater systems to determine when growth will require expansions or rehabilitations to the infrastructure. What we've done is this follows the township's growth management study, which was approved by council previously. And the outcomes will be to give you guys essentially a roadmap as to when and where upgrades need to happen, both immediate and long-term servicing strategies. Just as a reminder of the municipal class EA process, the master plan is phase 1 and 2, where we develop a problem statement or an opportunity statement, as it's more commonly called now, and develop some initial evaluation alternatives, solutions that can be addressed at the further stages of the municipal class EA. So the master plan is these sections in green. Just below, you can see sort of an overview of the next steps. Some projects or recommendations would fall under Schedule B Class EA, which would move on to Phase 2, more investigations and finalize the design, whereas some of the recommendations may follow under Schedule C, which would require Phase 3 and 4 of the environmental assessment. So we established, working with the township and your operators, Aqua, an opportunity statement, which essentially was we wanted to accommodate growth to the year 2051. And this water and wastewater plan will identify the key improvements to the existing water and wastewater infrastructure to serve current and future service population. So that's more for information. We'll get into, obviously, the study areas are the areas defined within your documents for what entails Finch, Chrysler, and Moose Creek. Population growth projections are shown below here from 2023 to 2051. As mentioned, those are off your growth management study. And that's what the population is based off of. So what are we looking at? The water system, which includes two components: the water supply, which is where you get the water from, and the capacity of your existing wells and things like that. Second component is the water storage, such as water tanks, elevated tanks, other things like that to meet needs, firefighting needs and storage needs. On the wastewater side, there's also two components: the collection system, which entails the pump stations primarily, and the treatment component, which is the treatment component, your lagoon systems and other things, whichever at each location. The intention of the plan is to plan ahead so that you're ahead of reaching 100% capacity. What we were looking at was undertaking expansions or implementing these solutions when demand reaches 80% of the capacity of whichever system we are talking about. For each of the overall systems, we developed a long list of alternative solutions to screen out larger things. We'll go through those later, but those are like do nothing or full mechanical plant or other lists. And from that, we develop a short list of alternatives that we then evaluated again in greater detail to come to your path. For info, the long list of screening criteria, basically the criteria is, does it address the problem and opportunity statement? There's more details here. Is the alternative feasible and reasonable? A high-level assessment of whether it can immediately be ruled out for some of those reasons, whether it be financial or scalability. Can the alternative be implemented without significant impacts, meaning ecological, social, or other impacts anticipated to be unreasonably high? Next step is to go to the short list, where we look more at the technical aspects of it, the constructability, the improvements, what's required, the approval requirements, the social and cultural impacts, the impacts to the public, the impact to built heritage and cultural heritage landscapes, the environmental impacts, whether that be to aquatic or terrestrial species, to surface water quantity or quality. And built into that is the climate change resiliency piece as well. And of course, economic, there are two components to that: the capital cost and the operational and maintenance cost. So the evaluation rating scale, what we have below sort of gives you the notation of how we're sort of presenting it in this presentation. The most negative solution, the one that might have the most high impact, is given a blank white circle. It's essentially a scale of 1 to 5, realistically, when you think about how the circles work, with green being the lowest impact. So we examined each component against each alternative. And you'll see that as we go through here. So I was going to hand it to Derica at this point. I guess she can turn on her microphone and walk you through some of the more technical components.
Thanks, Trevor. I will be asking you to continue sharing the screen, or I could
That's
take
fine.
over. It's up to you. Okay. Looking at the Finch water system first, we looked at the current and future capacity requirements. The graph on the left is the water supply, projected maximum day demand, that is as per MECP guidelines, and how we're supposed to project or meet the maximum day requirements of the future 2051 population. The graph on the right is the water storage requirements. And once again, that includes your fire flow storage, your emergency storage, and some equalization storage to maintain pressure within the system, positive pressure within the system. Of course, all the details are in the memo and they will be provided in the master plan itself, including how these were calculated, what were the historic factors, the per person water usage that was used and used as a factor for projections. And for Finch, we see that the water supply, the current rated capacity is 778 cubic meters per day. That is based on the permit to take water established by the MECP. The water demand will reach 80% of the system's rated capacity, as you can see, by 2024, if current water usage is continued. Keep in mind that none of the villages really have metered systems, right? So if they do have pretty high water consumption per capita. So if that continues, you will exceed 80% of the capacity by 2024, and then by 2051, you basically need 1,000 cubic meters a day. That being said, additional water supply capacity would be required by 2035. Another thing I would like to add in is we do generally also look at firm capacity, which is defined as the capacity of the system if the largest well or the largest pump is out of service. If the largest well is out of service, the drinking water system, a robust and reliable drinking water system, should still be able to meet the maximum day demand. And that's a firm capacity line you see there. So you can see that's already been exceeded. All right, that assuming that if one well is out of service, that's what you've already exceeded that as of 2024. For the water storage, the elevated water tank in Finch is at 500. It has a rated capacity of 500 cubic meters. The storage as of 2024, you can see that we're already surpassing the 80% of its rated capacity. Like Trevor, as Trevor pointed earlier, that's generally when we start investigating expansion scenarios and alternative solutions. And by 2051, you would need 888 cubic meters, and additional water storage capacity would be required after 2027 at the least, at the minimum. The next slide, please. Chrysler. So Chrysler, pretty much the same projection methodology was used. Water supply, the current rated capacity is 1685. The wells can give you that much. Water demand will reach 80% by 2033. You can see that the firm capacity is actually overlain over the rated capacity line. That's why that's because your permit to take water actually shows that both the two wells connected to the Chrysler water system, each well has a rated capacity of 1685. So if one goes down, you still have 1685 that's available to supply the system. By 2051, a capacity of 1867 would be required. So you would need to start expanding your system by 2044, because that's when you'll exceed your rated capacity. Water storage. Same thing, 1238 cubic meters storage volume is available in the elevated water tank. You would reach your 80% of its rated capacity by 2035. And by 2051, a capacity of approximately 1473 cubic meters would be required. I do want to note that these are based on current water consumption rates, current water consumption per person in each of the villages. It's, you know, if we put in meters, if we look into water conservation measures, they could shift. Has been many studies done by by OCWWA showing that water capacity has been reserved or conserved if water meters are put in. I'm going to the next slide. Moose Creek. Moose Creek was a little better on the water supply side. 600 cubic meters per day is the firm capacity, will reach 80% by 2039. And by 2051, capacity of 853 is required. So you do, and we only mentioned the firm capacity of the system is 600. The rated capacity is much higher. As you can see, it's 800, just close to 900 actually. So you do have capacity to continue supplying Moose Creek beyond 2051 even. But then your firm capacity, which is what the MECP recommends sizing the system for, that is what's being exceeded. Now in Moose Creek, they are replacing well 3. So when we get to the solutions, you'll see that we say that, you know, if your well 3, if the replacement well can meet that firm capacity, then there's nothing else needed for the system. For water storage, current elevated tank has 622 cubic meters of storage available. As of 2024, it's already at 80%, and you would need to look at expansion after 2030 or at 2033. So start planning before that. So a long list of alternatives were do nothing, limit growth, reduce water demand, expand existing water supply and storage system, and obtain water from another source. 5 alternatives. The first 3 are pretty much common to all master plans. They're taken from the MCEA process. The do nothing alternative gives you a baseline to show you what will happen if you don't do anything. And we provide that detail once again in the master plan, and essentially you won't be able to meet or continue meeting your water demands. Another alternative is limit growth. Obviously no township or no county ever wants to incorporate that, or very, very few number of county townships want to incorporate that, but it is still something that has to be looked at. Limit growth can also mean delaying growth until funding is available to address your infrastructure needs. And once again, that was taken out also as an acceptable solution. It was not evaluated further or did not make it to the shortlisted list. Reduce water demand or increase water consumption, that would not meet the problem opportunity statement because you couldn't reduce the water demand enough to be able to meet the 2051 numbers. You would still have to provide some expansion, but it can highly likely delay the year that you would need to implement those solutions. So that is why it is technical and economically feasible. Of course, it's highly recommended actually. And then the alternative can be implemented without significant impacts. I think about, if I'm quoting it correctly, about 92% of Ontario is currently metered. So this we put that in as a recommended solution, and we say that it's not an alternative that can be a solution on its own, but it will be recommended as general sustainability goal. Alternative 4, expanding the storage and supply system. We give 2 options for water supply and water storage. For water supply, you can either put in a new well to be drilled at the same location, or you put a new well in a new well field. Putting a well in the existing well field comes with some risks, of course. Risks at the exploration stage is if you have something like Finch where you have bedrock wells. Bedrock wells are limited or can have some limitations, not always, can have some limitations about the amount of water that's available. So you do have to it's highly likely you will have to do several investigations, drill several holes to be able to meet that water demand. Again, another risk with drilling in the existing well field is if that specific aquifer that now hosts all the wells that's supplying the system, if that aquifer gets contaminated, then you pretty much lose all your water supply, right? Very, very low case, you have water wellhead protection systems in areas that are marked out by conservations. But that's just a risk that generally does come in with putting in the same well field. A lot of small municipalities do note that risk, but they do have to continue putting the wells in the same area just because the water treatment plant is just right there. Raw water conveyance, you don't want to put a lot of money into that. And putting a new water treatment plant may just not be justifiable based on the costs, right? So in those cases, what we usually suggest is manage the risk, have
Darika, are we losing you there? Seems like.
We can hear you, Trevor, but I'm not sure. It sounds like Danica's line has dropped.
I think she's moving again.
I do see that my connection is unstable. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Is there some part of it that you want me to repeat or?
We'll
come back.
I don't think it was very long, so just carry on. I think you're good.
Okay, thank you. So a new well and a new well field would just be bearing the costs of putting a new water treatment plant in, but then avoiding all those risks altogether. For water storage, we looked at a new elevated standpipe or elevated tank or a standpipe. The options we looked at for locations basically considered several factors. For example, for Finch, I believe, or Chrysler, you have a river crossing. So we did look at putting the standpipe or the elevated tank across the river so that houses connected to the system can be serviced in case that water crossing is disrupted or damaged, in case of failure of the water main crossing the river. So those are some strategies we looked at. For alternative 4B2, which is new grade water storage tank at the water treatment plant, that is basically looking at either putting in a small tank right beside the water treatment plant. It takes care of, the conveyance of the water, minimizes the water main needed to convey the water to it, and also ensures the water remains fresh and some of the strategies that you will see in the master plan itself or the reports that will be given to you for review itself will show that putting the water storage tank at the plant itself can become a part of the existing system in terms of the clear well. And obtaining water from another source we looked at either Finch, Moose Creek, or Chrysler, obtaining water from the nearest large municipality. We looked at Cornwall as the first option. Of course, that was about 20 to 30 kilometers away. So that quickly was removed from the list. You're looking at about close to $30 to $40 million of water main conveyance. And then we also, for Finch and Chrysler, we looked at communal water system and communal water system between the two villages that could mean one water treatment plant between the two villages, maybe a couple wells at that right beside the water treatment plant, and then both villages can share the cost of the treated water conveyance to their respective villages. That was also removed that was also did not make it to the short list because of, as you can see, it didn't meet the technical and economical feasibility for obvious reasons, and it would have significant impacts in terms of permitting, land acquisition, etc. So alternative 4 made it to the shortlisted solutions. So the water supply recommended solution for Finch would be expanding it to 1,000 cubic meters per day by 2051. Expansion timeline is pretty much immediate. Well exploration should commence, that should say 2024 to 2030. It should commence within the next 5 years, which will allow for the implementation to happen in the 5 years following that. So the capital plan that we will propose as part of the master plan will be broken down into 5-year stages. For Chrysler, once again, expansion to 1760. We have a delayed timeline, so the exploration we recommend to be done by 2037 to 2042, and that would allow you to have finished your exploration, your hydrogeological investigations, etc., and allow you to implement your water solution by 2048. Moose Creek, because only the firm capacity is being exceeded, it will all depend on the well 3 that's being put in right now and what capacity it can provide. And then because your Moose Creek, the drinking water system can meet the 2051 water demand. If in the next iteration of the master plan, they find out that maybe growth has surpassed or the trend line has exceeded what was previously thought of, this can always be relooked at or revisited. So the next steps for any of these projects would be a hydrogeological investigation to confirm the water quantity and quality in the existing well field, and to confirm ability to supply the required future capacity. And because I apologize, as you can see in the table, the overall score showed that alternative 4A, new well in the same well field, is the recommended solution. I apologize, I skipped that part. For preparation of a mitigation procedure or plan to address the identified water risks, we say that because you have those water risks that I talked about, you would put that in a plan and have it ready or available in case of any risk issues. And then lastly, implementing the water meters to ensure sustainable water usage, which can significantly impact the timeline of the capacity exceedances. If you could just excuse me, I do need to plug in the charger of my laptop. Just give me 1 second. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So the water storage recommended solution. For unit, it wasn't lower than 10 million at the cost range. At Great Storage Facility, we provided several options of how that can be implemented, including extending the existing clear wells, right, which are used for chlorine contact time, and just putting a new tank right beside it and making it a part of the system. So minimizes any treatment needed or separate treatment needed for the water storage, and just minimizes any operational or maintenance, additional operational or maintenance infrastructure requirements. So for Finch timeline, recommended timeline is immediate. For Chrysler, you can look at not the next 5 years, but in the next 10 years. That's when you start exceeding your capacity. And for Moose Creek, similarly, next 10 years. Sorry, Chrysler was next 15 years, Moose Creek next 10 years. And the next steps would be proceed to detailed design, because this is 4B2 is a schedule, it is an exempt project under the MCA process, meaning that it doesn't need any further investigations or studies. The the township can continue with just implementing the strategy. So going to the wastewater system, the Finch wastewater system. Sorry,
Danica, if I can interject, maybe I'll see if council has question. I'd like to maybe separate the water and the wastewater to keep it simpler. So I'll maybe take questions from council on the water side. So go ahead, Deputy Mayor Densham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. Actually, when you were talking about the water storage recommended solution, your sound kind of bleeped out a little bit. It sounded like you were talking about the potential costs in there, but I was really interested in understanding that a little bit more, both in terms of cost, but also whether or not by if we improve the storage at mostly Finch, and I think you were recommending it for Chrysler as well at some point.
And
Does that
and yeah, Moose
change?
Creek as well.
Or Moose Creek, okay. But does that change the maximum, projected maximum day demand? Does that change that chart by having water available in the storage at all, or does that not change that chart if we were to upgrade storage?
Right. So when you say improvement into the water storage system, if you're looking at infrastructure improvements, I think it was either French or I'm not sure which of the townships elevated water tank. There were talks about being able to have more storage in those water tanks. It's not fully being used for it. It's not the most robust or redundant solution. When the cost I mentioned was for the elevated storage facility, and why that was why that was not the preferred solution, and that's because of the cost of that tank, right? You can see that the estimated cost came down to 10 million for the elevated storage facility. The preferred the preferred solution, which is the add-grade storage facility, I believe, I don't have the numbers right now, but it didn't exceed 1.5 to 2 million. And those are high-level costs. At the master plan level, per the MECP recommendations, we provide a contingency of 50% because it's a level 5 cost. So it can definitely go lower. It just depends on the design strategy. Improvements can also be made to the existing storage by minimizing your contact time. You can use your clear wells. You can put some baffling in there. That will reduce the volume needed for chlorine contact, and the remaining volume can be used for storage. But that will only push back the year that you have to implement you still need the new tank. But because you have used your existing clear wells and optimized it, and now you have some additional available storage until you get that funding in to build a new tank, but you will still need the new tank. In terms of the last thing I'll point out is the maximum day demand. Yes, if the MECP formula for calculating the required water storage, maximum day demand is one of the parameters in there. There's 3 parameters: fire flow, equalization storage, which takes into account the maximum day demand, and the emergency storage, which takes into account both fire flow and maximum day demand. The formula is available online, and it will also be in the master plan itself, the document itself. But if you are able to reduce your water consumption, you could push back the timeline needed for the storage. You could definitely lower the amount of storage volume you need. You could push back the timeline you need to put it. You could push back the timeline that the capacity would exceed. There's several things you could do, but ultimately you would, as you grow, of course, you would need new infrastructure, right? That's just part of growth.
Yeah, well, and maybe I'll visit when you're doing the public session and get into the details. But it was one of the questions was, if you increase water storage, does that decrease the maximum day demand, projected maximum day demand?
No.
Are those two interconnected at all, or no? No, they're not.
No, they're interconnected, but not in that order.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, increasing your capacity may decrease the
It's
storage.
decrease your demand.
Yeah.
You would subsequently increase or decrease the amount of storage required.
Perfect. Any further questions on water with the other councillors? So just one, and maybe when I look at some of these meter squared volumes that you've got of water, like the daily rate, in Finch, for example, you had at 778, you're moving up to 1,000, and to meet the 2051 in Finch. And when you look at Chrysler, which is a difference of 100 and I had it written down here somewhere, but when you look at Chrysler, it's only
very, very small well needed.
Yeah.
And another thing with Chrysler is that you have 2 wells in there, and one well can, per the permit to take water, you can operate that well for the year, but the second well you can only operate for 141 days a year. Now, that restriction may just have been that, at the time of the exploration or the investigation, that's probably all the water you needed. That was how it was written in the report. It's when you put in that new well, or when you undertake the investigation for the new well to meet that, what is it, like 100 cubic meters day expansion, you would we would recommend, looking at that well too, which has a limited supply or only supplies half the year, and seeing why that's the case. If you can bring that up, if you can bring its rated capacity up to its full rated capacity, you can buy some more time, right? Ultimately, all depends on the hydrogeological investigation, which is a Schedule B Class EA, and it wouldn't be done at the master plan level, but those recommendations do go in.
Okay, so that takes care of the water. I think we're going to need the expertise of our water works or Ontario Clean Water Agency because this is a fairly high level context that I think council is sitting here trying to absorb. So
It's a lot to digest, right?
there is a lot, and myself personally, I will be there on next week, and maybe we can, as same as other members of council, if you're planning on attending, maybe some of these questions could be answered also on Tuesday night next week. So,
And
we'll move on to the wastewater and get the overview on that one.
Yeah, and just to let you know, obviously, we have been working closely with Aqua, your operations team, and obviously your staff as well, to come up with these solutions and to work our numbers up to get to the projections and the existing conditions. So Aqua has certainly been instrumental in reaching this point as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. And typically the council meeting and the PIC is held after we have drafted the final version of the alternatives and solutions. We are at a stage where we're still having it reviewed by Aqua, but I don't expect any major changes because, like Trevor said, Aqua has been assisting us with coming up with these solutions and the projections, and have been at this project with us since day one. So it shouldn't change much. But yeah, moving on to the wastewater system for Finch, we just have the collection system, the SPS, that ships off all the wastewater to Chrysler. So the SPS is typically checked against the peak flow, and as you can see, the peak flow, the 80% capacity is already it will be exceeded pretty much soon, and the rated capacity is projected to exceed by 2030. So that was the issue for Finch. For Chrysler, Chrysler has two systems, the collection and the treatment system. Treatment is provided by the Chrysler Lagoons, and Chrysler also receives flow from Finch. So the SPS calculations takes into account growth from both Finch and Chrysler. And obviously the lagoon as well takes into account the projection calculations takes into account both Finch and Chrysler's growing population. For Chrysler, same issue, rated capacity, the SPS is exceeded, and you will reach you will need estimate of 60.6 liters per second by 2051 as a capacity of the main sewage pumping station. And sorry, I've been using SPS as the acronym, the sewage pumping station. And the wastewater treatment lagoons, you have ample capacity to continue servicing both towns, both villages, up to and beyond 2051. However, you do start exceeding the 80% of the rate capacity by 2042. I know it says 2040, but that's just to be conservative. You can say 2042, and that's when you start looking into expansion options. Of course, by then you would have done maybe a couple more master plans, and that issue would be identified in those, and we can start looking at options for a capacity expansion in the subsequent master plans and revisit it then. Moose Creek, same issue as Finch and Chrysler. Your SPS's rated capacity will be exceeded within the next 10 years. Or should I say, sorry, 5 years. 5 to 6 years. And the main issue is your lagoon will be exceeded. Oh, I'm sorry. In this case, the graphs have been flipped.
Yeah.
That'll be corrected at PIC. The SPS will be exceeded within the next 5 years by 2024. It's actually already exceeded its rated capacity. The lagoons will exceed its rated capacity by 2030, which is the graph on the left. And going into the long list of alternatives and screening, same reasons for taking out do nothing and limiting growth. We do look at infiltration and inflow, control and reduction. And surprisingly, it comes down to the same reason as the water, the high water usage. Metered systems or non-metered systems typically have very high wastewater flows per capita generated. That's because, you know, if your house is not monitored, if your water usage is not monitored, the amount of water going into, or the wastewater that you're generating and that's going into the collection system is obviously proportional to the amount of water you're using. So and that's why that is one of the strategies we say that will become a general sustainability goal solution, but not as a complete solution as an own. But it is important to bring that forward and seriously consider that. Alternatives 4 and 5 are upgrading existing wastewater treatment system, just like the water alternatives, and number 5 is expanding the existing wastewater treatment system. So for alternative 5, I look at that first because, as you can see, it doesn't meet the shortlisted options. We look at replacing the SPS with the larger SPS as for the collection system, and for the lagoon, which is only the Moose Creek Lagoon, right? That was the only lagoon that had the issue. Chrysler was okay. You can either look at a new lagoon or a mechanical treatment facility, converting it entirely to mechanical treatment facility. Both those options were crossed out because you would require land acquisition, high capital costs, permit and other requirements. They were not evaluated further. Only alternative 4 proceeded to the shortlisted strategy. And for the collection system, really no other option except upgrading the existing SPS, meaning using the existing SPS, but just upgrading the capacity of the pumps, along with some other operational and maintenance fixes that were identified. And for the lagoons, it would be you could do it with 2 ways that we proposed. We have provided cost alternatives for them as well, and strategies of implementing them. One would be optimizing the lagoons itself, and the second option would be modifying how it's operated by it would be a semi-mechanical facility, but we can't call it mechanical facility. It should be only called modified lagoon operations. So we do explore that in the next slide. And it's very highly detailed in the tech memos and the master plans that's been provided to Aqua and to the township for review. For the collection system, the upgrading the existing SPS, like I said, was a preferred strategy. And for Finch, the rated capacity should be upsized to 20 liters a second by 2051. The recommended timeline is by 2036. Similarly for Chrysler, recommended timeline for in the next 5 years, upgrading to 60 liters a second, and Moose Creek would be upgrading to 28 liters per second, and that's also within the next 5 years. And that's, although it sounds as simple as replacing the pumps with larger pumps, you would have to just also modify some of the control elevations and fix those ladders in there, and any gutting of the existing SPS based on its existing condition. And that's where some general costs would come in as well. The next steps for the collection system would be a detailed condition assessment of the SPS to determine any refurbishment needs, as concerns regarding deteriorating conditions have been raised, deteriorated ladders, hatches, etc. So they're basically unsafe to use for your operation staff. And if the SPS, though, are beyond rehabilitation, very low chance of that happening, but we do have to put it there in the master plan, just because there's always a possibility, right? Like a 1% of possibility of that happening. Then you have to undertake an SPS replacement project. And then of course, update the capital plan as a per phased approach. So a better news on the collection side, because you can use existing infrastructure. Also good news on the lagoon side is that you can use existing infrastructure. We do propose upgrading the existing lagoons by using technologies. We proposed 2 separate technologies. One was an integrated fixed attached growth system, and the other option could be a Sager cell, which is submerged attached growth systems. Both are capable of increasing the rated capacity of the lagoons by as much as you need. Actually, you just put in more cells of the attached growth, right? More media. Although since we are at the, like I mentioned before, since we're at the review phase, where we're still in talks with Aqua and seeing their recommendation. Initially, what we had hoped to put in was both alternatives, 4B1 and 4B2 are good. We might even change to that because the cost is very is pretty much within the same ballpark for both options. You would need an assimilated capacity study and a Class EA to expand the system that's needed for any water wastewater treatment capacity expansion. So the actual strategy can only be really selected after you do that Class EA, because you would have to do an ACS study, the assimilated capacity study, to see if your receiving stream, the Moose Creek drain, if it can actually receive more flows. If it can't, then what else can we do? Can it receive flows once a year as it currently does, or can it receive flows throughout the year? There's many options for that. If you want to do it throughout the year, you just need less space, which is good for the lagoons, right? Good for on the funding side, but your effluent limits would decrease dramatically. So you would have more stringent effluent limits. But your rated capacity would increase to 450 by either solution. So that is one change you might see in the final master plan once we review that or finish reviewing that with the township and the Aqua team. So before we go to the next steps, wastewater side, any questions that I can answer?
What's the timeline for the rest? I'm just looking at time here for the remaining of our council meeting. What do you anticipate? What's left in as far as your?
So
for our
sorry,
presentation, for our presentation now, are you referring to?
Yeah, just like as far as, are we getting close? Or are we?
We're almost up. We're almost up. Thank you for attending.
I'll let you finalize. Go ahead, guys.
I guess we were just opening it for any questions on the wastewater side. Again, you've just consumed a lot of information and numbers, but the preliminary story, I guess, on the wastewater side is the need in the near future to implement some upgrades for the Moose Creek Lagoon. It's our understanding that you have secured funding under some of the new funding streams available to undertake some of this work, and I understand Aqua is in the process of preparing a scope of work and an RFP to determine how you move to the next step, which would be the additional investigations in the Schedule C of the Class EA process. So that would get underway, and as Darika was mentioning, we are likely going to carry both of these options forward to the next phase, which allows a more deeper dive into the pros and cons of those things, as opposed to the master plan process, where we're trying to avoid getting too deep into the weeds without a lot of these additional studies that would be required. But that's the next steps for that process, specifically for Moose Creek being the one with funding available and sort of an immediate need. In terms of, just to wrap up, I guess, the next steps in the process of the master plan, as we mentioned, there is the Public Information Center next Tuesday. We'll take all the feedback we receive from stakeholders there and anyone else who has received the mail out about notifying about the open house. We'll use that information to complete the study. You will get those memos and studies to look at. They will be published online and be available for further public comment for 30 days. And barring any major comments, that sort of ends the master plan process. So that's essentially the sneak peek of our open house boards for next week. We've given you a lot of information, but you will receive paper copies of this. And what will go into the ultimate master plan, as Durika mentioned off the top, was a sort of a phased capital plan, which identifies the years in which all of these, in a table format, identifying the years at which each of these components might need to take place, along with high-level cost estimates to aid in your future budgeting and timing of seeking out potential funding sources or anything else. So that forms part of that as well.
Perfect. So thank you, Trevor. I'll start. I'll be taking some questions. So my only thoughts today when I was thinking about this presentation is with you mentioning the funding that was secured for Moose Creek, and I was just kind of looking at the step from that with this service master plan. Is there going to be multiple options that Aqua can look at versus one option that this is the go-to? And I just want to make sure we're working together and moving forward. I know it's not going to get done overnight, but I'm just trying to see, and I don't know if with your experience, what is a timeline that we could be looking at from being able to tell our developers that we have allocation, we're back in business? Is it something that we're looking at a year, 2 years? And please don't tell me 3 or 4.
Yeah, it depends on how quickly the process goes, obviously, and how quickly you can procure the services to start the Class EA, the Schedule C Class EA process. I know Aqua has been working on the side to put together that scope of work and the terms of reference to go out to an RFP or however they're going to do it. So those studies would need to take place over the next, depending on how robust of the additional investigations or how long they take, before proceeding to the detailed design of the preferred solution. And that can, I mean, there are ways to mitigate schedule, which obviously always come with risk. You can procure the Class EA process and the detailed design at the same time as part of the same RFP. That would save an additional, procurement time of going to another firm and getting them up to speed with the next phase of detailed design. And then the design and construction, obviously.
Perfect. So I'll go. Any questions from council? Deputy Mayor Densham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So again, thank you for the presentation. I'm trying to absorb all of this information. One question regarding Finch's relationship with Chrysler. The Chrysler projected peak flow, does that include Finch's flow? Is that additive?
Yes.
In there? Okay, because one of the things I'm wondering whether or not you're potentially going to investigate, and I heard you mention it with the well water, with the fresh water, but I've always wondered, since we're pumping all of this wastewater up from Finch to Chrysler, might there be a hybrid communal type solution that would be worth investigating for Finch, so that we don't have to pump as much up, and whether or not that's a solution you may be looking at as a potential opportunity?
Well, it is right now a hybrid communal system, right? A communal system would mean two communities sort of sharing the system itself, the wastewater or the water treatment system. The only other option is if you don't want to ship it off to Chrysler, then you would have to treat it at Finch, which is probably outside, probably not something anybody wants to go ahead with, right? Building a whole new water treatment plant.
Yeah, it would come with obviously a significant capital investment, as opposed to eking out more capacity from the Chrysler lagoon that is servicing it.
And we wouldn't, I mean, we wouldn't recommend that, right? Like you have a collection system that is sending it off to Chrysler. It's in place. You would need some really good reasons to not continue with that, seeing that
Yeah.
the systems have the capacity to continue working the way they are, with just minor expansion strategies.
I'll ask my second question, and I think Councillor McDonald was going to clarify because she understands the system better than I do in that area. As part of this exercise, do you review the user fee projections or provide any type of formulation so that we can kind of look at what so I know that's dependent upon the number of users and that we add on over time, but my assumption is if we don't add users at a meaningful rate, then the current user base has to absorb the cost of what we're doing here. So that's what I'm trying to understand is, what's the expected growth, or if we're under our growth projections that were provided to you for this study, what's the likely impact going to be in terms of what we would have to charge the existing user base? Is there a risk there on the fees? Because just for background's sake, from a previous study that was done last term when I was there, they recommended that we increase our fees by 5.7% every year for the foreseeable future. And we're to date have been following that. But my hope is in an ideal world, if we're putting new equipment in or we're improving the systems, does that change the trajectory? And are we likely to be able to see a little bit of relief for our users in the future?
Yeah, that wasn't really part of the scope of our work under the master plan. There are other studies that can be done in conjunction with financial people for rate charging studies, things like. I imagine that's what you're referring to that triggered your recent
Yes.
escalation of those things. It wasn't part of this scope of work. No, it's not typically included in a master plan. We look more at the capital cost and the O&M operation and maintenance cost in the long term. And
Okay, no, that's great. Fair enough. Thank you.
So
Through you,
maybe Councillor McDonald, we'll just get Kim to respond if you can add to that question.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. That study you're referring to was showing a 5.7% increase. I've looked at our asset management plan and they're projecting, their suggestion was about 4.8. So I've got two studies that are kind of saying the same thing at this point in time. So hopefully that helps.
Maybe you can elaborate on the first questions,
Yeah,
Councillor McDonald.
it's not really, communal system is what it's called, but we've been seeing a lot of presentations from companies like Newterra, and sometimes they call it decentralized water and wastewater treatment, but it's essentially these smaller systems that come in shipping containers that can be used to service like 100 to 200 to 250 units. And just kind of the hope that we might see those systems being considered as alternatives where a small amount of capacity is needed to create the usership and the rate payers to offset the cost of expansion. So we're seeing a lot, as politicians, we're seeing a lot of presentations and stuff about that in Eastern Ontario as a way to try to address housing crisis, usually in unserviced areas. But Deputy Mayor Densham was asking in relation to serviced areas, could it be used to offset capacity issues in short term at a lower cost?
now that's good input. But what we can do is take a quicker look and see how it compares to our both screening for the long list and then the short list. I believe we have some capacity to make sure we're looking at all avenues for sure. We received the same presentations that I'm sure you do from the companies that are selling the equipment, and they're stopping at your shop and stopping at our shops as well. So we're up to speed on everything that they're bringing to the table, and always open to look at those types of things.
Thank you.
Perfect. So before we move
Sorry.
on, any questions from that side? So I thank you very much for the presentation. I'm looking forward. I will be stopping by on next Tuesday and for further questions. And I recommend maybe other members of council, if you get the chance, the public can come in, give their input, but it's a start. It was kind of high level. So there is a lot to take in for what we have in front of us, but we appreciate it. We'll talk more on next Tuesday, and we appreciate your time with us tonight. So Thank you very much, and we will move on to our regular council meeting. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Craig, did you want to add something before?
No, just through the chair, I was informed, or I was educated on Nuterra at the OGRA conference, and I did share what I found with Don Crump at Aqua, and she provided some input. So that is one of the strategies that we had looked at earlier this year too.
Thank you. So we have Mr. Dan, is it Al? Al Dam. So welcome, Al. So if you guys recall, we had our famous chicken bylaw that came up. So Al is, maybe I'll let you introduce yourself and the credentials, but he can give us some further input just to help us out. I think it's going to be high level. I think the presentation was shortened to try to hit the timelines, but I'll leave it to you, Al, to take it from here.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Hope everyone can hear me and see the screen that I've shared.
Yes.
This is actually, I've done this slide deck before with numerous municipalities and with some municipal webinars we've done on urban and small flock considerations. So anyways, I am Al Dam, your provincial poultry specialist for the Ontario government. I work for the Ministry of Agriculture, Food. Oh, actually, it's not Rural Affairs anymore. Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness. My office is at the Vet College at the University of Guelph. I am not a vet, so that makes me a production guy and the voice of reason over there. Now, Craig asked me to talk about urban poultry and some of the issues we see there. So, why do people want to raise chickens or ducks or whatever, right? And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Food and maybe companionship, that comes up all the time. Know what is their own food supply, know what is fed to them, better life for the bird. I put that in a question mark because we end up with some challenges sometimes where we have definite problems with that. There's an education aspect for sure. Want to teach Johnny where his food comes from. There is some mental health aspects about keeping birds just like any other companion animals. But then people tell me it's a revenue generator. Well, that's actually a bad idea. And they want a cheap source of food, which is also a bit of a crock because these will be the most expensive eggs you ever eat in the grand scheme of things. Everyone's reasons for having birds is different. One thing is constant, and we call it the flaws of good management. I do this talk with commercial poultry producers. I do this talk with backyard flocks. FLAWS stands for feed, light, water, air, space, and sanitation. You need all of that to raise a good bird or any livestock animal. And people don't know what any of that is. Generally, we find when it comes to small flocks. So then we have disease risks. How do I mitigate potential disease risks? What are the diseases of concern? Well, there's multiple types of diseases, right? There's animal health diseases that the birds can get, but there's human health diseases that people can get from the animals. We call that zoonotic diseases. And they're both, right? So we can end up with some challenges, things like what are the diseases concerns? Of course, the salmonellas, E. coli's. We have things like infectious laryngotracheitis, which is a bird health issue. We have ILT outbreaks all the time in small flock birds. It's a bird health issue that resides in a lot of small flocks across the province. This can have an impact on our commercial poultry producers. Even influenza has been in the news a lot. And this has been the last 2 years of my life dealing with AI outbreaks that we've lost millions of birds through the country at the cost of billions of dollars. Plus many more that we can't even get into at this point because I don't have enough time. How do birds get sick from other birds? Domestic and wild, secretions and feces of infected birds, other sick animals, because we have animals, swine, poultry will share diseases. Dogs and cats can share diseases with poultry, contaminated surfaces, contaminated food and water supplies. What are the disease risks? Feed storage, housing, equipment issues, cleaning and disinfection done improperly, there's a picture of a bag of feed that's been emptied into a garbage can. You think that's a great idea. This is actually horrible. A plastic Rubbermaid garbage container can be chewed through by a rat. I tell folks when they're storing feed to put it in a metal garbage container with a steel lid. It keeps the cats and dogs out, but it also keeps the rodents out. Dust bathing is a way that birds can deal with external parasites like mites and lice. Do they have the ability to do that? And then things like foot baths, which I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with foot baths with disinfectant, because if they're not clean, you actually are just spreading disease throughout your flock. What are the disease risks? So we talk about equipment, waters, feeders, brooding. And if you're thinking of an urban poultry bylaw, hopefully you're not thinking about brooding and getting day-old chicks in there versus ready-to-lay hens, where you buy them at 20 weeks and they're ready to lay eggs, and off you go from there. Brooding can be done in all sorts of things, but like I said, for your purposes, you got to feed a chick for 5 months before you get eggs out of her. And if some of those chicks are cockerels, you don't get any eggs out of a rooster, and then you got to deal with that mess. So ready to lay is often a better option if you're going to go down that path. You're going to have pests and predators to deal with. And as the weather gets cold, pests come in. So we're dealing with things like mice, skunks, raccoons. I have a special hate on because sometimes raccoons are purveyors of raccoon roundworm, which can impact chickens, but that can also impact humans. If you want to know what that is, to your local health unit. But things like everything eats chicken, right? And that's some of the challenges you're going to deal with. When I talk about rodents, I tell folks, remember a dime and a quarter. Why a dime and a quarter? Well, a hole the size of a quarter, a rat can fit through. A hole the size of a dime, a house mouse can fit through. That's how tight something has to be if it's actually going to be rodent proof. And now you're dealing with having to deal with rodents or rodenticide or snap traps or whatever. And they'll go after, like, they love feed. They love chicken feed. Lots of rodents, lots of things like chicken feed. I get into discussions with farmers and backyard flocks about what took my bird. Is it the neighbor's dog? Is it a mink or weasel? I'm sure you've got dogs in the municipality. I'm sure you've got mink or weasel. And when mink get into a chicken coop, they get into a bloodlust and they will kill everything. Dogs will kill for sport. So that's another mess you sometimes have to deal with. Raccoons, possums, owls, foxes, and coyotes, skunks, and you'll know the smell. Several birds gone, no clues. It's probably your neighbor or a raptor that has come in. So that becomes part of the challenge with raising birds, is that everything wants to eat them. Shelter becomes an issue. So you don't need anything too crazy for that. But, are you going to be using portable shelters that can be moved around? They're less expensive. They can be moved around. They can be simple to make. The challenge becomes, how many birds do you have? Are you going to overwinter them? Because poultry isn't just get them for the spring, get rid of them in the fall. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you don't. If you're going to overwinter them, then you need something that's a lot more robust than this. And we deal with things like, can it be insulated? How is it serviced? How heavy does it need to be to protect the chickens from predators and the weather? I've run into situations where people have been keeping birds in aluminum drive or garden sheds, and the birds are blind because the ammonia's burnt out their eyes. They don't have combs, toes, or wattles because they've had frostbite. At that point, we're calling our provincial animal welfare services on that person because they've done some egregious animal abuse at that point. Do you need to winterize a coop? I get asked this all the time because chickens are hardy, right? They got feathers. Do you need a heat source? Well, they may need heat because, yes, birds have feathers, but sometimes they don't. If they go through a molt at the wrong time of year, you end up with something that looks like a rubber chicken walking around, a naked chicken that needs heat, and eggs will freeze, and if people are consuming, that frozen egg now becomes an open entry for bacteria. So you need to have it insulated. You need to have proper vapor barrier on it. You can't, I have urban poultry folks that forget to insulate the roof from the door, and they can't keep the shed, the coop warm enough. And the birds cannot have access, especially the styrofoam. They will eat it. And now you have petroleum products in that hen. You need to have water accessible to them, and you need a heated water of some sort. You can use heat cables on drinking nipples. You can get a heated fountain. I had a farmer show me this. What a great idea this was. He ran a heat cable through a eaves trough. He goes, "What's a great?" Well, you can't really see it, but there's chicken feces in the bottom of that tray, because the birds will roost on that, and they literally defecate right into it. His response to me was, "Well, it's okay. It goes to the bottom." And my response to him was, "You drink the water. You're selling those eggs." So that's not, you need to be able to manage this. This is not puppies and kittens we're dealing with. You need proper heating on that, whether it's a heating pad, a heated perch, or an inductive heater like that. These electric oil heaters are actually really good for small flocks because they're simple. There's no moving parts. If it flips over, it doesn't catch on fire. We've had small flock folks use creep heaters for piglets, but we've had people use barbecues and propane heaters. Well, or these electric ceramic heaters because they're cheap. Well, they also burn. How do you run power out to that coop? Because that becomes an issue too. Maybe you end up burning your whole garage down because of that. And then finally, you're going to be dealing with 1 pound of manure per hen per week. And this stuff is high test stuff. It will kill a composter if you put it in there. So you're going to have to be able to manage that manure. We do not recommend putting raw manure in a garden, because if those birds have salmonella, it's in the manure. And you put that manure in the garden without it being composted for a year, guess what? Your vegetables will have salmonella also. We can have issues with flies, odor, all that other fun stuff. That has to be managed properly. And if that coop in the wintertime doesn't have enough ventilation and doesn't have enough airflow or bedding, then we get ammonia. And that's when we get into some issues where you're burning out eyes of these birds and creating respiratory issues. If you got livestock, you're going to have dead stock. So what do you do with those hens at the end? Throwing them over the fence for the neighbor's dog to eat isn't a good option. But I get asked all the time, well, can I render them? Well, usually it's not viable because of the cost. Can you compost them? Yeah, it can be effective when managed properly, but where do you do that? Burial. In rural areas, that's an option. Are you going to want people burying back birds in their backyard in town? Probably not. Incineration isn't a viable option either. I always get asked about municipal garbage. I'll just throw my dead chickens in the garbage. Well, that's going to be on you to figure that out. People tell me, well, I throw chicken I buy from the grocery store in the garbage all the time. My comment back to them is that chicken was deemed fit for human consumption. We don't know what your bird died from. It's actually a biological hazard. So the poor person who's picking up that garbage may be exposed to God knows what. So in the grand scheme of things, yeah, there's lots of issues to deal with here. Some of the things I wanted to show you that also come up with small flock stuff is I do actually have a small flock course I teach with the Poultry Industry Council. You can see here, it's I don't know if you can see this or not. It's 188 slides. It's a 4-hour lecture I give online. We even do things like how to euthanize a bird. I've had people leave the room crying when I show them how to cervically dislocate a bird. They didn't realize that might be part of it. Well, what happens if a bird breaks a wing and it's Saturday night and you can't get a hold of a vet? We euthanize that bird. But like I said, I got 188 slides in this deck, and I go over everything from soup to nuts that we just spoke about. There is a couple of other things I wanted to show you. Oh, sorry, let me just pull up my slide deck here. So we do have a code of practice for the care and handling of pullets and laying hens. You can download that. It is quite inclusive of a lot of different things. If you're going to go ahead with something like that, I would make sure that your bylaw takes into account the codes of practice. This is the Raising Backyard Chickens course I do every March with the Poultry Industry Council. This, I find, is the biggest challenge you have with backyard flocks, is that people don't have the proper education. And I'm sure you guys have seen on the internet, there's a lot of crap out there. So this is a way that we put something that is actually tailored to the urban poultry set. And we've had people take this course and then tell us afterwards, you've convinced me not to have birds. And I'm sitting there going, great, because that's one less person who doesn't know what they're doing that's going to out there have birds. We actually created a website. Poultry Industry Council got some funding from the Ontario government to create Small Flock Ontario, which goes over a lot of the things I've talked about already in depth, and made it into some crunchy bits that people can understand. I used to have a small flock kit that I used to give out years and years ago, and we've just updated it to give people something they can understand. Finally, Public Health Ontario has actually published something on a semi-frequent basis about reducing health risk associated with backyard chickens. This is on the Public Health Ontario website. And finally, when things go wrong, not only is it a bylaw challenge for yourself, but if it's an animal welfare issue, Animal Welfare Services gets involved. They're part of the Solicitor General, which include police officers and the courts. Be called to any complaint 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what happens, like the penalties can include, if we see something egregious, 2 years in jail, $130,000 fine. This becomes an issue when we have some of the real challenges with animal welfare, but this could potentially be a challenge also. So anyways, that is a real quick and dirty challenge or something to throw at you. I've given Craig a pile of information that he's tried to sort through, and he's asked me to come and give you this tonight. So if you got any questions, I'm more than willing to answer some. This becomes a very passionate issue for people. I understand that. And this is why I've done work in this area, because there's a lot of garbage out there in terms of information. There's a lot of pilot projects, and a lot of municipalities are looking into it. Some municipalities have decided against it because they're concerned about their rural commercial poultry farmers and the impacts to that. Others have started pilot projects, and sometimes they've gone through, sometimes they haven't. And in some cases, some cities have said, we already, like for instance, Sudbury, I was doing the same talk with the city of Sudbury years ago. Sudbury's got a bear problem in town, and they decided we're not going to do poultry, urban poultry, because we don't need more bears coming into town. So long and short of it is, I can tell you what we do in agriculture. What you want to do in town is going to be up to you. How you deal with dead stock, how you deal with rodents, how you deal with neighbor complaints. We have the right to farm legislation is called the Farming and Food Production Protection Act. That doesn't apply in town. How you deal with excessive egg production, people that want to slaughter in town, some of the health unit challenges you may have. It's really, I hate to say it, but it really falls on you as a municipality as to how you want to manage that. And at that, I'm going to shut up and let you guys ask some questions if there are any.
If I could, through the chair, Al, when we had that conversation yesterday, I was hoping to have, or my intention was to have an objective overview. And I think there is a way to keep chickens, and it can be a positive experience and not have a negative impact on the community. And I think having local bylaws to mitigate that are available to us. Are you indicating that this is something you would not endorse?
So as
Because
a
again, I wasn't trying to influence council's decision. I just wanted to provide some more education on the impact.
let's just say, as a good bureaucrat, yeah, well, as a good bureaucrat, I'm not allowed to have an opinion, right? But I can show you the pros and cons. A lot of municipalities have gone ahead with it and have been very successful. The challenge becomes where I come into this fray often is after you've started and we've started having some challenges. Now, there are examples of municipalities that have successfully done that. We're actually doing, Poultry Industry Council has got the town of Georgina talking about their pilot project we helped them with. Once again, the biggest challenges I see with urban poultry production or issues is education. If you have the education, the people know what they're getting into, then we can have a good discussion and people can understand what they're getting into. If you don't, you're often you're going to end up with some challenges. And I'm going to say this quite brutally because we've seen it. So we've had some municipalities that have actually made this raising backyard chicken course mandatory for people that have been involved in the pilot project or some of the other ongoing things. So that can be a way to mitigate some of the risks that people understand what they're getting into. In the commercial industry, we do a lot of training for our farmers, and there's a lot of auditing of the from a food safety standpoint, from an animal welfare standpoint, animal care, to ensure we have a safe product that goes to consumers. I want the same thing to happen with you guys, right? I don't want people doing silly things and then whatever goes into that hen goes into that egg. So we want to make sure that what people are consuming is safe. And there's lots of ways that can get messed up, whether it's improper feeding or giving birds access to stuff they shouldn't get. And yeah, I don't mean to be poo-poo the idea, but I've just seen too many things that have gone wrong. So I want you guys eyes wide open going into this to know that. And I am here as a resource if you guys decide to go ahead. But there's going to be some challenges, like to do this properly. You have to know what you're getting into.
Well, thank you. I'll maybe see if there's anything myself. I'm not a flock or a bird, but it kind of opened my eyes, and I'm sure people that do have them would kind of think twice and really look into this presentation that you did.
Yeah.
There is people out there that are doing the right way, and they are, but again, it's the people that aren't that are causing the issues that we're seeing. And I don't know if council Sure, go ahead.
A quick question. Thank you for the presentation, Al. I think one of the biggest issues that we struggle with too, when we look at something like this, would come down to not just like you said, the education. You can try to legislate or education to a certain level, but you can't legislate common sense. And the other big factor would be enforcement. And enforcement is kind of what's led to this to begin with. And if you're going to have an effective bylaw, from listening to what you said, there is a lot of boxes there where enforcement plays a key factor to making sure they're following these steps. So bureaucratically speaking, it seems like you're taking a problem and making it 10 times worse, because now you've got to make sure all these things are being followed so that you're not in a situation where, we're turning the situation from bad to worse.
Well, and like this raising backyard chicken course I do initially started because City of Guelph has allowed backyard chicken since the 1940s. We had their bylaw enforcement officers ask if we could put together a course for their bylaw enforcement folks to understand what they were walking into when they walk into a backyard coop. This thing has morphed over the years into something that we've had, especially when we do it online, we've had people from Northwest Territories and all over the world, because once it's online, anyone can log in anywhere, right? But yeah, some of the challenges you can run into is your bylaw enforcement folks are going to be doing this off the corner of their desk, making sure you've got good facilities, a good housing system for that, making sure you're not running into some challenges where you've got an animal welfare concern, let alone now a food safety concern. Yeah, that all has to be taken into account.
I think one thing that might be useful, and I don't know if you've already had the conversation with our CAO, is if there are any municipalities across the province that you know have successfully, implemented something, and that their current bylaws that they've drafted are very tight and very really hitting the marks. If you could maybe share which municipalities those might be, so that we could look at those bylaws, how those are currently written, because I don't think it's easy as something just uncanny of like there's a lot to look at here.
Yeah, and I've looked at some of the bylaws where they've said take your dead chickens to a local farm, they'll deal with them, right? Like that's, I don't know where that came from, and that has been in someone's bylaw that was picked up and caught. Like I said, the township of Georgina has they worked with us on their bylaw, and when we did this course, this backyard poultry course, they made it mandatory for some of the people in the pilot project to take the course, and that I think has led to fewer challenges with that. But like I said, we've had other municipalities that are in more agricultural areas have just out and out said no. So that's going to be a tough balance for you guys to figure out how you want to manage the pros and cons of each. I'm sure you got lots of responses if you put an open comment period out. I always chuckle when I talk to a municipality that has had an open comment period and they can't believe how many responses they get. And I kind of smile and say, yeah, and 95% of those responses were outside of your municipality, right? It's a fact of life with some of the urban poultry bylaws that once a municipality is known to have put an open comment period out, it gets shared around in some of the online forums and with links to your website, and then I'm sure you got inundated, and I'm sure that's happened.
And I believe it has. But what all I can do there, regardless of the direction that we're going to take on this, council is going to have to. I would appreciate. I think Craig's got your number. All the information, the links, is something that could be posted on. If you can add to that.
Correct. And through the chair, Al and I did have a brief conversation yesterday, and part of that conversation was to share in council's direction on how we were going to try and draft some bylaw regulatory framework within our animal care and control, not our nuisance bylaw, and we were going to remove it from the zoning. So I did share all of that with Al, and Nancy Ann was part of that conversation as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, regardless, Craig's got your number. If you are a wealth of information when it comes to that. In this case, maybe too much now. It's just more rolling around in there trying to make our decision. But I appreciate the time that you took to inform us on this. And again, through Craig, we appreciate it, and we'll stay in touch if need be.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm here as a resource for you. I'm supposed to be a production guy for commercial poultry, but part of the reason I'm doing as much work in the backyard side is that there's just a demand for it, right? And we've seen some really good things happen, and we've seen some challenges. So good luck.
Thank you very much. And if you have yourself a good night, and we're going to move on to try to get wrapping up our regular council meeting. Thank you, Al.
Thanks, everybody.
So we're through our delegations. Moving on to item 5.1, the adoption of minutes of our previous meeting.
Be it resolved that the following minutes be approved as presented. Zoning meeting, August 20th, regular meeting, August 20th. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Deputy Mayor seconded by Councillor Bajelli.
Any discussions on the meeting? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Moving on to adoption of minutes of the committees and local boards.
That the Council of the Township of North Stormont receives and approves the following committee minutes as presented. North Stormont Fire Services Committee minutes, May 16th, 2024, for information purposes. Moved by Councillor Bajelli, seconded by Councillor Shane.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the fire committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to Court of Revisions Committee meeting.
Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of North Stormont approves the Court of Revision Committee minutes as presented for the July 22nd, 2024 committee meeting. Moved by Councillor Bajelli, seconded by Councillor Shane.
Thank you. Any questions in regards to the Court of Revision? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. Item 7.1, the receiving of monthly staff reports and recommendations.
Be it resolved that the following monthly reports be received: economic development, planning, bylaw enforcement, building, fire, recreation and facilities, public works, finance, CAO school renovation project. Moved by Deputy Mayor Densham, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Any questions in regards to the report, starting with Deputy Mayor Densham?
No, I just wanted to congratulate and thank the fire chief for a really good graduation ceremony for the recent graduates of the new recruits. I think it was everybody felt well recognized, and I think it was done very professionally. And it was a really fun time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much, Nancy. It was, I showed up, Nancy had texted me saying it's at the Moose Creek Hall. So I drive up to Moose Creek Hall, the parking lot was full, and I'm thinking, okay, what, am I missing something? So then I thought she meant the Moose Creek Fire Hall and just kind of called it that. But no, it was very well attended, and I appreciate the time that yourself, our coordinator, Derek Orr, and everybody involved with the training, and congratulating our new graduates. Any other questions in regards to our staff, Councillor Bajelli?
Just one question actually for our EDO. I was just curious about meeting with Post Media and how Post Media could assist us in attracting new business, and if that was more advertising pitches or.
Thank you. Sorry, that's the first question I ever get. Thank you through the chair, thank you and everything. This is something that our CAO Craig had forwarded on to me, so I had responded kindly saying, hey, thank you, I'm happy to discuss this further with you. So I had a meeting with them, and they've helped other smaller communities with some ideas and whatever. So they're putting some stuff together. I said, yeah, send it our way. But I made it very clear that it wasn't for any time soon in this budget, but we would look at it possibly for next year. So waiting on something from them. Of course, I will talk about it with Craig and go from there. It was just a meeting out of courtesy and see. Who knows? Sometimes these meetings, you get something really good out of it, so we'll see what happens. Make sense? All right.
Thank you. Any further questions? I have one for our rec director. Can you maybe just elaborate? I'm looking for the word invert. Is it a software that will lead into, and I'm in here, and it's Inversus, or what's the program that you're?
Universe. It's for you, Mr. Mayor. It's the new booking that's been purchased by Universe, and right now it's now called this Comparative Booking. It's a rental facility rental for online.
So is that for all our community centers, the arena, everything that looks after booking?
Presently, the arena is using it, and so is the Chrysler Community Center, so we want to get the rest of them on board. There's different programs into this, either go to sports registration, pool registration. Of course, all these programs are added venues to this portfolio, so we're going to start by getting everybody on board. And then from there, if a specific community center wants registration for the pools, they can either buy that program, or we'll see if we can make a package where we can do all their sports registration to this portfolio. We're not going to go with the POS system because these are extra fees, so each recreation will be in charge of their own, the way they do their banking and like they're doing presently. So be more of a standard for all of our recreation as far as putting documents on rentals or policies. So everybody's going to be working on the same system.
Perfect, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the reports, motion is carried. Moving on to 7.2, procurement policy revision for 2024.
The Council of the Township of North Stormont receives Finance Report FIN 2024-18, the 2024 revised procurement policy to be approved formally by bylaw at a future date. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Deputy Mayor Densham.
Thank you. So I believe our treasurer is pretty proud of the document that she's put in front of us. Maybe before you My only questions that I've already had in regards to RFPs when where there was dealing with the new purchase of our school and getting the contractors in there to retrofit our new administrative building. There was at times a few glitches where how it's worded and stuff, and I just want to make sure we're covering our basis and making it clear for when we are following the process of what's needed prior to giving out the awarding the tenders. So maybe I'll let you just elaborate a little bit before council gets questions.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. One of the biggest things in the old procurement policy was there was no avenue formally for emailing documents or electronic documents. There was no reference to 2 trade agreements, which open the bidding to everybody. And one of the major changes is public meetings are not necessary, and so that's been put as an option for opening tenders. I kind of like it better when they're closed, because that way you can make sure all the math is correct on the documents. You can make sure the HST is right. You can make sure the bid bond is there, because sometimes at opening these things are missed, and someone will be in that public forum and think they have it, when we review it and finalize it, they've missed something. So I think it's a better avenue that they're looked at in their entirety, make sure everything's correct, and then it goes to council with proper recommendations. So I think that's actually going to be helpful to us.
And if I can add to that, I think the transparency's there. My main intention is we're looking after the best interest of our residents and our taxpayers. And the intent here is if it's a small glitch where you make a phone call and say, hey, wait a minute, and in one case, it was where myself reading the addendum wasn't quite clear, and that's where I really struggled trying to see where you could potentially have a local contractor and it's something very minimal, and the way it was worded previously was, you're disqualified, and there was no option to, and that's just something where I want to make sure we're looking into to make sure that we cover for the best interest of our taxpayers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a really clear document or attachment to that procurement policy that talks about what the status of the bid is. So like if there's no signature or it's inlaid, it says automatic rejection. There's parts in there that says, okay, maybe you missed something. You have 24 hours to fix it. So there are options there that are very, very clear. And actually, I don't know if the counties mirrored us or we mirrored them, but they're very similar.
And I was going to interject, it was good timing. I did siphon the current SDG procurement policy that was just drafted. We are very similar as per the treasurer. The only deviation, of course, is we've lowered the approval amount that the CAO has, and I agree that these are public funds and they should be approved by elected representatives of the community. So I think it's a good balance.
Deputy Mayor Densham.
Yeah, I know I asked for this topic, general topic, to be brought up at committee of the whole in terms of how we evaluate, because I do see things like unsealed envelopes, automatic rejection. And I'm not even sure that I understand what unsealed envelopes is unless it means somebody didn't lick it and put it down. Something like that, to be an automatic rejection, I would need to understand better why it's so harsh, because if somebody happened to put it on and it came through and they just didn't lick the envelope properly, or it became, the sticky didn't stick as much, it just feels like all of a sudden now we could have somebody who gives a very good price, and but our bylaw says we must automatically reject them. So is it really that harsh?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the problem with the documents not being sealed is there has been times when if I see you bidding, that the documents get switched before handing them in. Also, if there's bid bonds attached and it was in the original sealed document, that's good. But if it's unsealed and that bid bond fell out, then they're going to be rejected anyways. But also we're at risk because that bid bond is gone. So now we're on the hook for money.
Yeah, and again, I guess I'm looking at the recent event that happened, to me, it just felt like a small technicality in the sense that we could have reviewed and called the supplier. And I realize that what we're trying to do is to provide a very sound and fair process. But at that point, it felt to me like we missed an opportunity to potentially take on a better price point, do something better for the people of North Stormont as a ratepayer over what felt to me was a technicality. So that we don't have to discuss it here. That's what I was hoping we could discuss at the Committee of the Whole meeting, just to make sure that we agree to the implication of what we're doing and we fully understand why it's there in the first place. Because I don't disagree with the reason for it, but is there no recourse when when an honest mistake or an honest oversight happens that we believe might be in the best interest of the ratepayers to address?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the purpose of this is to be very transparent to everybody on the rules. It was also suggested that maybe future tenders go out with that bid criteria. So it's very clear to them, it's going to be rejected if this is not included.
Right.
Same playing field for everybody. I've done it in the past, and it's not a bad practice at all, because then everybody knows the rules. But I think you're being transparent to everybody out there if you do it that way.
Yeah, okay, so I'll leave it with that, but I'd like to still have that discussion in a little more detail at the Committee of the Whole if we could. The other question I had, if I may, Mr. Mayor, one of the items was to remove advertising in newspaper, or some of the newspaper advertising to publish, I guess, tenders that are out there. Are we replacing that with electronic then? What's our means of advertising?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the website, there's the electronic bidding sites, Bidding Go and things like that. It's just newspapers are now becoming more and more redundant, so people aren't seeing them. So if it just goes in one local newspaper without the option of electronically, it's not seen.
So we're just modernizing it?
Yes, basically.
Okay, perfect. Yep, thank you.
Any further question, Councillor McDonald?
Just a comment that it's a lot easier to go through if it's track changes. It's really hard if it's like old document, new document.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know, but I tried that and it was just getting overwhelming to make it coherent, so.
I figured there's probably because I know you've given it to us like that before, and it just makes it a lot. These are already hard to interpret, and then trying to figure out what changed is like. But I appreciated the summary that you provided, so we could kind of go to the relevant sections. So I appreciate your updates.
Okay, thank you.
Questions that side? Seeing none. So Craig, possibly, is that something we can put on the agenda? Or
It is on the agenda.
It is on the agenda?
On the draft agenda that we have, Leanne and I are working on right now, so.
Because I'd like to comment on the sealed part, which I think, I understand being sealed, because there could be, that's where the transparency can go out the window. But what I feel is, once they're open, to be able to just look and say, oh, wait a minute, you're missing that. And if it's an honest mistake that, oh, I didn't think we needed it, then I feel somebody can have that, I'll be there in 10 minutes, is an option versus just saying, you're out of here. So anyway, so we can discuss it further at the Committee of the Whole. So with that said, all in favor of the procurement bylaw? Motion is carried, or just a report, sorry, not bylaw, sorry. Perfect, thank you. So there's no unfinished or new business. Moving on to correspondence. So correspondence 12.1 to 12.7.
Be it resolved that the correspondence as listed as items 12.1 to 12.7 on the agenda be received. Moved by Deputy Mayor Densham, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Any questions in regards to our correspondence? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Moving on, our next scheduled meeting will be September 24th, 2024, and the first meeting of October will be on October 8th, 2024, both at 6:30. For coming event, we do have our lottery information session that will be taking place September 19th at the Moose Creek Hall at 7 o'clock. maybe I'll just ask our clerk to see Leanne, if you can maybe just elaborate on that evening.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we're fortunate enough to have the Alcohol Gaming Commission come out and do a presentation to our local charities and organizations. Any of the public wanting to attend, it will be a hybrid meeting, in person and Zoom. We do have the Zoom link and meeting information on our Facebook page for getting on the meeting. We do encourage people to come out in person. It's an information session where people can learn, listen, and ask lots of questions from the Alcohol Gaming Commission, who set out the regulations that the municipalities need to follow for lotteries. So I'm hoping to see many out there. Any questions or concerns, send me an email, give me a call. We can help you out.
So this is a discussion that a lot of people think it's Leanne making the rules and it's all her fault, but no, I think she did great work. So to get OLG to come and do a session, there's a lot of neighboring municipality that have reached out, that are going to be attending. So I think good on us, and I look forward to start participating. So Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I think based on the shares I've seen on Facebook, I'm hopeful that you're going to get really good attendance at that. And is the session being recorded? Can somebody go back after if they couldn't make it and watch the session?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The session is going to be recorded. It will be posted on YouTube. I don't have the link exactly of where that's going to be, but it will be recorded. And anybody that's attending, or if they want to send me an email, I can also send the slide deck once the presentation is done from the AGCO. But yes, it will be recorded and they will be able to go and listen to it.
Perfect, thank you.
And just for the public, there's no poker tables set up or anything. So thank you, Leanne. So moving on to ratification.
Be it resolved that bylaw number 75-2024, being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify council's actions at its regular meeting of September 10th, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 10th day of September 2024. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Deputy Mayor Densham.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion is carried, and moving to the adjournment.
Be it resolved that this regular meeting adjourn at 8:17 PM, moved by Deputy Mayor Densham, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Perfect. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. So it wasn't too bad past the two delegations, but I appreciate everyone for council for coming, members of residents on Zoom, and Monsieur La Victoire joining us. So everybody have a good night.